In Monster Hunter World, there are many aspects to consider when taking on a hunt. The target, your weapon, these are all important, but hunters who want optimal performance need to consider the build they use via the armor they wear. I'm Darcblade, and here are some more builds that I use for the Chargeblade. The skills that you can gain from armor and even some weapons can help shape your hunter into specialized hunter machines. And with this set of builds used in this video, I hope to demonstrate some of the endgame builds players can craft. This means that there'll be a lot of gamma armor sets used, as well as Kulftaroth weapons and some of the rarer jewels. But if you're able to get your hands on all of these, you'll be able to craft some of the most powerful builds in the game. So first up is the Elementless build version 2.0, as I like to call it. This is an upgraded version of the Elementless Chargeblade build found in the first season of build videos. This is mainly a DPS build, focusing on using the Taroth Strong Arm Horn or the Diablos Tyrannus 2. So for this build you'll need the Dragon King Eye Patch Alpha, Nergigante Mel Gamma, Kushala Grips Gamma, Nergigante Coil Gamma, and the Nergigante Greaves Gamma. I'm also using a Handicraft Charm 3, and for my weapon, like I said, I'm using the Taroth Strong Arm Horn, which has a health regen augmentation on it, as well as an affinity increase augmentation on it. As for your jewels, now there are a lot of jewels to consider here. Firstly, you need to consider getting yourself an Elementless jewel to boost the attack power of weapons who have their element or ailment hidden, as is the case with the Taroth Strong Arm Horn or Diablos Tyrannus 2. Afterwards, you need to consider getting your hands on a magazine jewel, which will increase the amount of files you have with this build. Afterwards, you need artillery jewels to increase the damage of our file bursts, an attack jewel to get attack boost to level 4, a handicraft jewel so we can get our sharpness to white, Charger Jewel to max out our focus skill, Tenderizer Jewel to max out weakness exploit, Iron Wall Jewel to provide that guard up, and then finally a Sharp Jewel to provide us with protective polish. Anyway, if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 100 health, 100 stamina, 1008 attack with white sharpness, 5% affinity, which is actually 55 so long as you're going for weak points and have maximum stamina, no element, impact files, and you'll have a strong defense, especially against ice and water, but you're fairly weak to thunder and dragon. Now, as for the skills, you'll have attack boost level 4. As always with most builds, try to get attack boost to level 4 as it gives you that extra 5% affinity. You also have handicraft level 4. Handicraft level 4 ensures that you get the white sharpness with the Diablos Tyrannus 2 or Taroth Strong Arm Horn. You'll have weakness exploit level 3, which gives you an extra 50% affinity when going for monster weak points. Focus level 3, which is quite a useful skill for the Chargeblade, as it increases the rate at which your files will charge up, leading to more super amped elemental discharges, meaning more damage. You have artillery level 3, which increases the damage of our file bursts. Maximum might level 2, which increases our affinity so long as we have maximum stamina, which is useful for the Chargeblade as you don't really use much stamina up apart from when you're blocking or rolling. Agitator level 1, a byproduct of the gear, but nonetheless can come in handy as it increases your attack and affinity when a monster becomes enraged. Capacity boost level 1, this is the skill provided by the magazine jewel. This increases the amount of files the build has, taken up from 5 to 6. Guard level 1, this is thanks to the Iron Wall Jewel. Guard level 1 combined with a fully charged shield allows you to pretty much guard point most enemy attacks, allowing you to follow it up with a guard reaction super amped elemental discharge if you so desire. You also have Protected Polish level 1. Protected Polish and Handicraft go hand in hand with this build, as that Protected Polish allows you to keep that white sharpness for a fixed duration after you sharpened your weapon, and then finally you'll have non-elemental boost level 1. You'll also have the set bonuses Nergigante's Hunger, providing you with haste and recovery, increasing your health when you're attacking a monster. This combined with the health regen augmentation means this build has quite high survivability options despite having only 100 health. So there we have it. As you can see, it's an Elementalist build focused more on DPS than anything else. There is room for augmentation and changes if you so desire. For example, you don't have to go with Protected Polish and Handicraft. You could swap out the Handicraft charm completely for, say, the health boost charm if you would like a bit more survivability, adding an extra Handicraft jewel in place of the Sharp jewel. This will mean you only have blue sharpness, but means you may be able to survive a bit longer. Regardless though, for me this build is probably my go-to build when using the Chargeblade. It can be used against any monster, as Elementalist builds are normally universal, because you don't have to take in a prey's weakness resistances into account. You can just go in with this build and deal a decent amount of damage regardless. Anyway, let's move on to the next build, which is the Tank build version 2.0. This is very similar to the Tank build found in the Season 1 episode of the Chargeblade, but has upgraded and had some skills changed out. Nonetheless though, it should provide you with great defensive options and superb health regen. So, for this build you'll need the Kulftaroth Furies Gamma, Valhazak Mel Gamma, Kushala Grips Gamma, the Valhazak Coil Gamma, and the Valhazak Greaves Gamma. I'm also using an earplug charm free, and for my weapon I'm using the Empress Alma Ruin. This has a health regen augmentation attached to it. Now as for your jewels, of course you have your mandatory ones required for the charge blade, so that's a magazine jewel and artillery jewel to provide the bonuses to our files. I've added a charger jewel to max out focus, vitality jewels to boost our health, iron wall jewels to provide that little bit of extra guard, earplug jewels to max out earplugs, a shield jewel to allow us to block unblockable attacks, a medicine jewel to add some points to recovery up, and finally I've just topped this off with a flawless jewel. Anyway, if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, 738 attack with white sharpness, 0% affinity, 120 blast rating with impact files, and you'll have a strong defense, especially against water and thunder, but you're fairly weak to fire and dragon. As for the skills, you'll have the following. You'll have earplugs level 5. This will make you completely immune to the roars of monsters, and whilst this is not necessarily needed for any charge blade build as you can actually block enemy roars, it nonetheless provides a little bit of extra quality of life. You'll have health boost level 3, increasing our maximum health to 150, recovery speed level 3, increasing the rate at which we recover our health, focus level 3, as I explained in the Elementless build, it helps charge up our files quicker, peak performance level 3, this increases our attack while we're at full health, artillery level 3, increasing the damage of our files, recovery up level 2, unfortunately I can only really get this to level 2, this increases the amount of health we recover, stun resistance level 1, a byproduct of the gear but can still be useful for resisting stun effects, dragon level 1, unfortunately a byproduct of the gear we're wearing, it's not really needed whatsoever, power prolonger level 1, again a byproduct but can still be useful in this build as it allows us to keep our files charged for longer periods, capacity boost level 1, increasing the amount of files we have, guard level 1, as I said with the Elementless build, this combined with a charged shield should allow us to block most attacks and still be able to follow up with a guard reaction, guard up level 1, allowing us to block unblockable attacks, hasten recovery, allowing us to recover health when we're actually attacking a monster, and you'll have the Valhazak set bonus, Valhazak's Vitality Super Recovery, allowing for our entire health bar to recover on its own, not just the red portion. This combined with haste recovery and the health regen augmentation means that you shouldn't have to stop and worry about healing yourself. Your health will also naturally replenish itself with this build. Unfortunately though, this build lacks a little bit on the DPS side. The main source of your DPS will come from your file bursts, namely your super amped elemental discharges. But this build is aimed at survivability, being able to survive monsters quite easily without too much stress. The sheer amount of health regen on this build, coupled with the defensive options like guard up, iron wall and vitality boost, means that even against the toughest monsters, they shouldn't bring you down very quickly. Now of course there are DPS options available to you if you want to swap out certain bits of gear. For example, you can completely drop earplugs altogether if you so desire. You can instead, if you wanted to, maybe put in a attack charm and use some attack jewels to get your attack boost to level 4. But if you do this, you just have to be a bit more confident in being able to roll out the way and dodge or even block monsters' roars. Personally though, I've really got fond of using earplugs. But anyway, let's move on to the next build, which is the KJARR, or KJARR, depending on how you want to pronounce it, Elemental DPS build. This build focuses on the KJARR strong arm elemental weapons gained from Arch-Tempered Kulftaroth. It can work with any of them, but for the demonstration and purpose of this video, I'll be demonstrating probably what is considered the best one, which is the KJARR Strong Arm Ice. Anyway, for this build you need the Kaiser Crown Gamma, the Damascus Mail Beta, Kaiser Van Braces Gamma, Kulftaroth's Malice Gamma, Kaiser Greaves Gamma, and the Handicraft Charm Free. I'm also using the KJARR Strong Arm Ice with a health regen augmentation on it. As for your jewels, of course there are a few mandatory ones here. The magazine jewel is pretty much needed on all charge blade builds. Afterwards I've gone for frost jewels to boost the frost rating of this weapon, a charger jewel to max out focus, tenderizer jewels to max out weakness exploit, and a mighty jewel to add some maximum might. Anyway, if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 100 health, 100 stamina, 738 attack with white sharpness, with 60% affinity, which is actually 100% should you be going for monster weak points. You'll have a maxed out 620 ice rating with power elemental files. You'll also have a strong defense, especially against fire and thunder, but you're fairly weak to water and ice. As for the skills, you'll have critical eye level 7, increasing our affinity, ice attack level 5, increasing the ice rating of our build. Granted, with this weapon, having 5 points in ice attack is actually maybe considered a little bit wasteful, as the final level only provides a little bit of extra ice rating. You'll have weakness exploit level 3, increasing our affinity when going for weak points, focus level 3, increasing how quickly our files can be charged up, Handicraft level 3, Crit Boost level 1, a byproduct of the gear but can still be handy as it increases the damage of the non-elemental portions of our attack if we crit a monster. You have Capacity Boost level 1, increasing the amount of files we have, Maximum Might level 1, and Critical Element level 1. Critical Element increases the damage of the elemental portion of our attacks when we crit a monster. You'll also have the set bonuses Teostra's Technique, Master's Touch, preventing sharpness loss when we crit a monster. And as this build easily has 100% affinity, so long as we're going for monster weak points, it means we should see no sharpness loss whatsoever. So there we have it. As you can see, it is a very powerful elemental build. And whilst yes, the file bursts of the Charge Blade cannot crit, a lot of the other attacks that the Charge Blade has can, making affinity completely viable for a DPS build on the Charge Blade. Now of course, like I mentioned, you can swap out the KJARR Strong Arm Ice for whatever elemental weapon you want. Just make sure it has power elemental files. Also, if you do so, whether you swap it for other KJARR elemental weapons or just other weapons that have the power elemental files, be sure to swap out the Frost jewels to match whatever element you are using. Also, when using this build, you also have to consider the elemental weakness of whatever monster you are facing. Unfortunately, most of the time elemental builds are not universal, but with this build, you can easily swap in and out other elemental weapons and it won't mess up the build at all. But anyway, let's move on to our fourth and final build, which is the KJARR Ailment DPS build. This build again utilizes the Arch-Tempered Kulveturuth weapons that have ailments. This primarily focuses on the KJARR Strong Arm Numb, which is a paralysis weapon. So for this build you need the Kaiser Crown Gamma, Kaiser Mel Gamma, Kushala Grips Gamma, Kushala Cocoon Gamma, and the Kaiser Greaves Gamma. I'm also using a Mighty Charm 2, and for my weapon I'm using the KJARR Strong Arm Numb with a health regen augmentation on it. As for your jewels, of course, mandatory ones I've gone for artillery and magazine jewels to max out the skills related to them. I've gone for tenderizer jewels to max out weakness exploit, a charger jewel to max out focus, paralyzer jewels to max out the paralysis rating of this weapon, and finally an expert jewel to add a little bit more critical eye. Anyway, if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 100 health, 100 stamina, 702 attack with white sharpness, 55% affinity, which is actually 100% so long as you're going for monster weak points, 410 paralysis rating with impact files. You'll also have a decent defense, especially against fire, but you're fairly weak to water. As for the skills, you have Critical Eye level 5, Paralysis Attack level 3, increasing the paralysis rating of our build, Weakness Exploit level 3, Focus level 3, Artillery level 3, Handicraft level 3, Latent Power level 2. This is a byproduct of the gear, but can add a little bit of extra affinity to the build once Latent Power activates, Maximum Might level 2, Capacity Boost level 2, and Critical Status level 2. Increasing the paralysis damage of an attack when you crit a monster. You also have the set bonuses Teostra's Technique, Master's Touch, preventing sharpness loss when you crit a monster. And as this build has quite a high affinity rating, it means you shouldn't lose too much sharpness and be able to keep the white sharpness for a decent amount of time. Now, obviously this is a DPS focused build again. You can swap out a few jewels here and there if you so desire, maybe even drop the Mighty Charm in favour for a vitality boost or more defensive orientated skills. But regardless, the build as it is able to paralyze monsters quite quickly, so long as they're not completely resistant to the paralysis effect, allowing you to freely perform the super amped elemental discharge on a monster's most vulnerable point. This build also works well with teams, as it allows you to provide a crowd controlling role, as when it comes to the two crowd control ailments, paralysis and sleep, paralyzed monsters cannot be accidentally woken up by teammates who aren't paying attention. Also, if you want, you could swap out the KJARR Strong Arm Numb for the KJARR Strong Arm Blast, which has blast rating instead of paralysis rating, or even if you wanted to, you could swap out the weapon for any weapon that has an ailment. But if you do so, just remember to swap out the paralysis jewels to match whatever ailment you are using. Also, in regards to all of these builds, I may have been leaning more towards DPS focused builds rather than survivability builds, but with the Charge Blade having a health regen augmentation on, I've realised that when you perform super amped elemental discharges, it restores an incredible amount of health to your hunter, meaning that you don't really have to stop your assault to heal, at least while your files are charged. So there we have it. Those are some more builds that I like to use for the Charge Blade. Of course, Monster Hunter World is always being updated with new monsters and gear, which can potentially cause these builds to change and become even stronger. And with Iceborne on the horizon, as well as Master Rank, this is probably going to be the case. So, when that is released, I'll be sure to release updated builds for all the weapons in the game. Also remember that almost any task in Monster Hunter World can be taken on with any weapon and gear set. You don't have to use what is shown off in these videos. These are just the sets that I personally like to use. But anyway, I hope you found this video helpful or informative, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you the builds that I use for the Charge Blade in Monster Hunter World. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.